South African president tells international community that illicit financial flows are depriving Africa of an estimated $50 billion. More than $1 billion Power Africa commitment set to be announced today. Plus, Kenya cuts its benchmark interest rates to 10%. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on the midweek edition of Business Incorporated, coming to you live from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago. We begin in Japan, where the central bank has made changes to its stimulus program in its latest attempt to spur economic growth. The Bank of Japan kept interest rates unchanged, but said it would aim to keep yields on 10-year government bonds at around current levels of 0%. The BOJ is also aiming to push inflation above the 2% target rate, which was set more than 3 years ago. And it will continue to buy assets such as government bonds at the rate of 8 trillion yen a year. Japan's Nikkei share index rose after the announcement, while the yen weakened to about 102.5 yen against the dollar. Now let's cross over to Europe to see how the markets there are chewing the BOJ's decisions. Let's talk to DWTV Channels TV financial correspondent at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, Janelle Dumalong. Good afternoon, Janelle. Now, the Bank of Japan announced that it was abandoning its target to increase the monetary base, launching yield curve controls and scrapping its bond buying range, but it left rates unchanged. What do investors there think about this decision by the Bank of Japan, and how is the market reacting to it?
Well, markets are reacting quite positively to this news, especially banking shares are driving this rally. And you can imagine why. A negative interest rate was to make sure that that banks didn't hold on to their excess reserves and instead lend them out to money, to lend them out to people and businesses in order to stimulate the economy. But the fact that the BOJ has decided against further deepening its negative interest rate was definitely welcome news for the banks, who felt that these policies were eating into their bottom lines. So now the BOJ is now seen to be sort of acknowledging that that the negative rates haven't always worked the way they want them to work, and that's given the markets here some hope. Although, you know, I have to say, this morning there were some analysts that I talked to, and one in particular said that the overhaul of the BOJ's policy is a bit like reacting to the sinking Titanic by rearranging the deck chairs. So it looks like a lot of activity, but it's also a bit of a non-event, and many investors are really quite skeptical that this overhaul will result in the push in inflation that Japan is trying to get at, or that it will do anything really or have a long-term impact on the markets. And that sentiment has been echoed around here quite a lot. And yes, so that is how the markets are reacting quite generally.
Now, Fed is expected to announce its rate decisions today. With these steps taken by the Bank of Japan, do investors and the market expect to see Fed take same direction later today?
Well, for the Fed, it's been a bit of a simpler question. Will they raise the rate today, this week, or not? And nobody seems to think that will happen, although obviously the Fed statement will be closely scrutinized for hints as to whether a rate hike will happen in December instead, when it has another policy meeting. Many do expect a rate hike to be announced then, although it has to be said, based on the comments out of the Fed that have been coming out in the last weeks, there seems to be a division in the Fed's rate setting committee between the more hawkish sides and the more dovish sides. And many analysts are saying that a likely compromise could be that there's no rate hike this time around, but a low bar for a rate increase by the end of the year. Though obviously we have to understand that politics will also play a central role here. U.S. elections are also coming up this year, and that may also be a factor in why the appetites to really shake things up in terms of monetary policy have been greatly decreased. So how the politics plays out will be a factor, of course.
Oh, well, Janelle, I think we have to wait for Fed to come up with their own decisions. Now, let's look at some of the companies making news in the markets today. Which are those companies?
Well, since today is a big day for central banks, we could expect that that the companies who would see their bottom lines most affected by the decisions taken by especially the BOJ today, to have the most news going for them. So here in Frankfurt, especially, those are the banking and financial shares. We have Commerzbank that it saw its shares go up more than 3%, and you have insurers like Allianz and Munich Re. They saw gains of more than 2% respectively. Now, beyond the central bank story, however, investors are also looking quite closely at Takata shares. That's the Japanese airbag maker that's been struggling with the fallout of this exploding airbag scandal. It saw its shares, for example, plunge to 7% today, which is nothing compared to the 12% drop it saw yesterday after reports that some potential buyers of Takata, since it's been trying to get sold, are actually looking into bankruptcy proceedings. Now, beyond that, there's also Volkswagen, and a German court announced today that it now has on its desk 1,400 lawsuits worth 8.2 billion euros from investors seeking compensation from the Dieselgate scandal. And while there hasn't been a massive effect on Volkswagen's share price as of yet, as of this moment, we can be certain that investors will be watching these proceedings very closely.
Right, thank you very much, Janelle, for your time with us today. We move on now. South African President Jacob Zuma told the international community on Tuesday that illicit financial flows are depriving Africa of an estimated $50 billion. While speaking at the ongoing UN General Assembly in New York, Mr. Zuma says the unrest in African countries such as Libya, South Sudan, and Central Africa remains a continental priority.
The successful implementation of Africa's development plans depends on the availability of resources. We are therefore seriously concerned about the loss of resources of the continent through illicit financial flows. The joint African Union and UN Economic Commission for Africa's high-level panel on illicit financial flows from Africa estimates that illicit flows from Africa could be about $50 billion per annum. Illicit financial flows deprive developing countries of the much-needed economic resources to uplift their economies in order to provide infrastructure and basic services such as education and health care. We urge the world at large to treat this problem with the seriousness and urgency that it deserves.
And more than $1 billion in debt and financing commitments from U.S. agencies and private investors is set to be announced today for U.S. President Barack Obama's signature Africa Energy Initiative, Power Africa. USAID Chief Gal Smith says the latest deals were finalized around a U.S. Africa Business Forum on the sidelines of the annual UN meetings in New York. He said the deals covered funding for regional infrastructure, facilities, risk insurance, and renewable power projects in Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, South Africa, and Tanzania. Obama launched the initiative in 2013 with an initial investment of $7 billion, which aims to install 10,000 megawatts of new generation capacity, connect 20 million new customers, and improve electric reliability across the sub-Saharan Africa. And U.S. authorities are investigating the way ExxonMobil has valued its assets following a plunge in the price of oil. The company said it was fully compliant with a request from the Securities and Exchange Commission for accounting information. Exxon is the only big U.S. energy firm not to have taken a charge to reflect the slump in oil prices. The SEC is also examining how Exxon accounts for the potential impact on its business of climate change policy. It follows a similar investigation announced last year by a group of state attorneys general. After the break, we get reactions from the international community to the Nigerian central bank's rate decisions. To stay with us.